Hey, Godfather of Anxiety here. I just wanted to do a video on the danger of allowing your mental health condition to become part of your identity. And this is something that if you have any of the anxiety spectrum conditions, or if you've battled clinical depression, especially if you've battled them for a long time, or perhaps maybe as long as you can remember, this can be a really difficult part of recovering. It can actually be one of the biggest challenges in recovery, realizing that we are not our condition. And this happens because, especially if we've had it from the time, for as long as we can remember, we can feel a lot of trepidation because, let's face it, we get used to routines and we find comfort in our routines, right? Even bad routines. This is something that I definitely have battled during my recovery from anxiety spectrum conditions and depression. It's when we're anxious or depressed, we get into these horrific routines. We may even become agoraphobic. We stop doing the things we enjoy. Our worlds become small and miserable, but we've developed a routine. And even though it's a miserable one, and it's like a prison, it's a routine, and we find a measure of comfort in it, a measure of security in it. It's not logical, but this is how this develops. This is how you start to develop an identity that is attached to a mental health condition. Also, we also tend to be very uncomfortable with change, right? Those of us who have these anxiety spectrum conditions, and a lot of the time depression too, but we're control freaks. So we're very uncomfortable with change. And again, a lot of change might not be bad, and it's also inevitable, right? So an example of this would be, let's say you've battled anxiety or depression for years. You start taking a medication and the anxiety is fading away, it's dissipating. Well, instead of, rejoicing about this, instead you're like, wait, this is different. What's wrong? How am I going to deal with this? This is different. This has to be bad. And and that's just not, the way it should be. It's a positive change. You've been living in a fight or flight response for months or years, and you've just gotten so accustomed to it that when you're not in the fight or flight mode, it causes anxiety because you're like, though, this is different. Different must be bad. No. Different is not bad, especially when you've been battling anxiety spectrum conditions and depression for years. This is not logical, right? But a lot of mental health conditions in general, but also anxiety spectrum conditions, depression, the habits that we learn, the mental thought patterns we learn, they are not logical. We do things like catastrophize. We what if thinking, we catastrophize. We get into these, magical thinking. We develop compulsions that we think somehow are going to stop something bad from happening. All of these things that take so much mental energy, but so then when they're lessened through medication or through therapy, it can feel scary. But this is where we need to learn to embrace change and realize that a lot of change is very good. As far as anecdotally, guys, I got to the point, I had anxiety spectrum conditions so long and been clinically depressed so long that, how we normally just plan our lives and we look forward to the next day, maybe the next week, maybe a vacation. I had gotten into such a bad routine that it was impossible for me to even look forward to the next day. Imagine that. I couldn't even look forward to the next day. It wouldn't matter if something good was supposed to happen. I couldn't do it. It's almost like if I allowed myself to do that, I felt like somehow I was going to sabotage it. Again, pure magical thinking, purely catastrophizing, but this is where I was at. I couldn't look forward to the next day. I'd been depressed and I had been anxious for years. So this was something I had to overcome. I still, if I'm not careful, I'll still fall into that thought pattern where I'm hesitant to look forward, and this is again, it's not logical, and it can prevent you from planning ahead the way everyone does and should, so that things go the way you want them to. But and then also I have seen people, especially people who have had the condition for as long as they can remember. I've seen people, one person I know has extremely bad OCD and they've had it since childhood. And when they've used medication that has worked and lessened their OCD, they get terrified because they're so used to the OCD. And they feel like it's part of their personality. And it's not. It's not. I always feel like this person could, has so much potential if they were able to realize that, they are not their condition. And again, these mental health conditions are extremely difficult. So I'm not judging anyone. And we all have a hard time overcoming these mental health conditions because we're experiencing physiological responses. There's nothing fun about these conditions. And when you're actually having a physiological response, it's hard to tell yourself, oh, it's just your thinking, it's your mind, it's, because really it's not. It's at that point, it's become a physiological response, whether it's whatever symptoms are caused from having adrenaline dumped and, from being in a fight or flight state. So in all my videos, I always try to talk about how can you overcome something. I don't just want to give you the negative and the things that you might face. So with that in mind, how do you prevent this from happening? Or if it has already become a reality, how do you overcome when a mental health condition has seemingly become part of your identity? The first thing you have to do is realize that your mental health condition does not define you. Whether it's OCD, whether it's generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, depression, whatever it may be, it does not define you. That is not who you are. That is, you do not want to be defined because you are, your body's misinterpreting, neurotransmitters, and you're having this terrible response to it. You don't want that to be your identity. You don't want that to define you. So don't let it define you. You are not your condition. You are not OCD. You are not anxiety. You are not depression. And you may have to, tell yourself this frequently, especially if you've started down the road of recovery. That's when these things will come to a head. Because when you're just stuck in that prison of anxiety and depression, you're not going to experience this. But as you start to come out, as it starts to dissipate, that's when you're going to have to remind yourself to not let these conditions define you. The next thing you have to do, you have to realize change is inevitable, and very frequently change is good. Change is not bad. Change can be great. And you have to learn to embrace it. That's the one sure thing in this life. Nothing is going to stay the same. And think about it. Would you want to still be a baby in a stroller? Or would you want to maybe when you were young, you made some foolish decisions? As much as you may appreciate the health and the vigor that came with youth, do you want to go back there to some of the ignorance that you had and some of the terrible decisions you made? So change is a good thing. Change can be a great thing. And, change is scary for us. We're control freaks, right? But you have to learn to embrace it. It's that simple. And, the more that you realize that change is not bad, that not all change is bad, that a lot of change is very positive, this is going to help you so much in recovering from one of these mental health conditions. You would not believe what an important part of recovery is accepting change. Another thing, stop catastrophizing. This goes right along with accepting change, but one of the reasons we're so reluctant or reticent to accept change is because we already, it's bad. Change is bad. Because we know everything is going to be bad, right? This is going to happen. This bad thing's going to happen. We're a million miles ahead in our mind, a million steps ahead, drawing the worst possible conclusion to every scenario. This is what happens when you have anxiety disorder, panic disorder. This catastrophizing is one of the big defining characteristics of those conditions. And you need to learn to stop doing that. And this is going to take cognitive behavioral therapy. It's going to take exposure therapy. But once you realize and you prove to yourself that the worst outcome is not always going to happen, embrace it. Don't be scared of it. Don't allow the discomfort of something new keep you from enjoying the life that you should have. We are not intended to be stuck in prisons created by our own minds. That is no life to live. It is a small world. It is a miserable world. And you're constantly in fear. And you feel down and dark all the time. Everything is, clinical depression. I mean, like I've said in so many of my videos, it's like being emotionally dead. In some ways, it's like a living death. You don't want to stay there. You don't want to stay in a cycle of fear. You don't want to be housebound. These are the things that happen when we allow our mental health condition to define us. We don't want that to happen. And then if you're somebody who developed one of these mental health conditions, maybe later in life, like I was very fortunate. I had 31 years where, yes, I was a worrier, a what-if thinker, but I hadn't had any panic attacks, and it wasn't to the point of being a diagnosable condition. So what other people like me, what you guys should do, look back and remember the times that, the things that you were able to do before, how it felt to just be able to get in a car and drive and, not worry about things that, you have no control over. I look at some of the trips I did prior to my anxiety disorder, my panic disorder. Those are things that seemed impossible when I was, really deeply affected by panic disorder. But part of recovering was remembering, hey, you did that. You can do that. That's within the realm of your abilities. And so if you have had a time in your life when you were not experiencing these conditions, look at pictures. Go back. Prove to your mind that you were able to, live your life, go places, travel, accomplish things with education and work. Remember what you were able to do. Because nothing has changed. You have those same qualities. You have the same skills. The only thing that's changed is you have a mental health condition. So again, in overcoming it, that's one of the things that I have found is good, is to go back to before I had the condition. Now, if you've had the condition for as long as you can remember, then you should look around and observe the people that are able to just do things. What you'll find is that they may be people who lack a lot of the abilities that you have. Because most of the time, people with anxiety conditions have a high IQ. We're generally people of high IQ with a lot of abilities, a lot of creativity. And you'll see people who've been dealt far less as far as abilities go, but are able to accomplish things because they are not fighting this war in their mind. So, one of the people I know is the idea of driving to them seems impossible. And then I tell them, I say, look at some of the people that are driving. This is not something that requires you to be a rocket scientist or, have some special abilities. It's something that, everyone can do. And, I feel like whatever you can do to realize that these mental health conditions, this is not the way it's supposed to be. We have them for such a long time that sometimes it's, like I say, it either becomes part of our identity or we allow it to define us. That's not going to be a happy life. And it's not the way we were intended to live. We were never intended to live in fight or flight 24 hours a day. We were never intended to be clinically depressed and emotionally dead. That was never the way that we've been designed. So we're social creatures. We're meant to love, to give love, and to receive love, and to interact. That's what is going to bring fulfillment to your life. So, anyways, I felt like, even in doing research for this subject, I felt like there wasn't as much on it as I would have expected, because so many of the people, again, I know people with these mental health conditions, and I've watched these mental health conditions, and with me as well, kind of almost become part of, the personality, a kind of part of who we are. And I remember during my recovery how hard it was to allow myself to accept change, especially good change, to look forward to the next day, and to realize that this is not who I am, that these conditions are not who I am. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who has struggled with that during recovery. The bottom line is, don't be scared of the change that happens when you start to recover. Embrace it, accept it. It's the way it was supposed to be from the beginning, right? If you've experienced this from the time you were young, this is what life was supposed to be like. So that's about all I want to say in this video. Thanks so much for all of the engagement with the channel, the comments. It's been outstanding. And until my next video, guys, take care.